So what do you think makes Raya different from everything we've seen before, if there are any difference at all?
Well, I think, I don't know if Moana would consider herself a warrior. I mean, she obviously was, I mean, she's the daughter of the chief, and she went on an adventure, but it was, you know, it was, in terms of her categorizing herself as a warrior, I'm not sure if she would. Obviously, Mulan did and trained and to be a warrior. I think Raya, to me, is just a whole nother level of badassery. I don't know if you can print that, but
we can.
in terms of just her skill level and her her identification, like I think she definitely would identify as a warrior. And you know, Guardian of the Dragon Gem first, which is definitely a warrior from birth. I mean, she's been training to be a Guardian of the Dragon Gem, so she would definitely identify as a warrior. And I think she's, without question, the most badass.
Yeah, and I think the DNA of the movie, like if you were to look at it outside of the other, Disney animated films, its heartbeat is an action movie versus the other ones that could be, especially with the princesses, are more based in musicals and great adventures of a different sort. Raya is a full embrace of the action movie genre, and that's what's been so fun and kind of crafting her as, as Don just said, in her badassery.
And it also seems like the stakes of the world are its all-time high for this kind of story and this kind of character. The fact that the world is on the verge of being no more, and the fact that she sort of like takes it upon herself to try to find something that's going to help them survive and move forward. I think that just brings the story and her journey to a whole new level. And yeah, she's a warrior, but it's the stakes are very, very real.
So the next thing is, I actually wanted to address like a little bit of controversy which happened like a couple of weeks ago when the trailer dropped. So I've seen the movie, and I actually found that, yes, Sisu is like very cute and kind, but we like used to see dragons as fierce and powerful. So what was the decision after the way the dragons looked like in the movie?
That's not too controversial. Sisu, because the movie is influenced by the many different cultures of Southeast Asia, and obviously it's a fantasy. We are making a fantasy film inspired by many different cultures of Southeast Asia. The Sisu as a dragon is based on the Naga, which is the dragon of Southeast Asia, and it's a very specific kind of dragon, and that yes, they can be fierce when needed, but they're actually more creatures. They're divine in nature, and they're much more connected to water, peace, harmony, and sort of positive values. And so we were just leveraging off of the myths and legends of Southeast Asia in terms of the Naga. And also just from a story perspective, I mean, there's a couple times when Sisu gets fierce, and it's kind of shocking. You're like, oh, didn't know you had that in you. But ultimately, they are creatures of peace and sort of benevolence, and it actually worked in our story too, because Raya is a warrior, as you pointed out, and there's a sort of ferocity to Raya in terms of her fighting ability and stuff like that. And so I think, to balance out the story, even, I think Sisu being less fierce and more driven to get humanity to, trust each other and to build a better world. That's her mission. And you do that not by violence, but by, speaking to the good in people.
I think something about this movie that we were really excited for from day one was the relationship that Raya and Sisu get to build, because as you mentioned, when you think about like a dragon story, when you think about the the idea that, at least for us Westerners, we think about like dragons, it's very specific, and it's this larger than life creature. It usually like has, really strong, you can't imagine building a relationship with the kind of dragons that we grew up watching, right? So I think that creating a character in which you can really form a bond with and have an intimate connection, and they could really be sort of like having a one-to-one conversation sitting next to a boat talking about profound issues was really important. And I feel like the design of Sisu, both physically and also her character traits, really allowed us to do that, which is what the movie's built on.
And dragons, I think Western dragons are creatures of intimidation, whereas the creature we were creating was a creature of inspiration. And so I think that, as Don likes to say, that, when you watch a movie and you turn off all the sound, you need to be able to quick read it. And the quick read on Sisu was a character that you would immediately want to be with. Like, as soon as you saw her face, as soon as she appeared on screen, for a kid, for anyone, to kind of honor the kind of story we're telling, it needed to be a character that Raya could immediately want to embrace. And that was part of like creating a character that her driving force was one of inspiration versus intimidation.
Mm-hmm. So Raya is like you already mentioned, she's very action-like. So I could even feel like a little bit of Lara Croft vibe when I watched the movie, and at the same time, it really relies on building of the character, which is usually a weak spot for action movies. So what do you think, how like your team managed to do it, to make an action movie where the character is actually developed, where she's changing, where she finds her weak spots and like just becomes strong?
Well, I think, thank you for that, because that was definitely by design. And I mean, look, we're fans of action movies, and we've seen when they go wrong, it's usually exactly what you just mentioned, is that they don't develop the characters, and the action scenes themselves are sort of obligatory. You could take they don't really advance the story. It's just action for action's sake. And so we certainly were aware of those pitfalls, just being fans of action movies. The second part of that, though, is that Disney, just in the way we approach our films, whether it's an action film or a musical, like Frozen or Moana, it's always character first, character first and always, really. And so I think those two things, being mindful of the pitfalls of a typical action film, coupled with the way we approach and build our films, which is always character first, hopefully led to an action movie that is character driven, as opposed to soulless action film where you don't really identify or care about the main character.
I just appreciate the Lara Croft comparison, because you say Lara Croft, I would say Indiana Jones, because Don Hall, who's who's a huge fan of that, I think maybe some of his DNA ended up in that character, and it's one that every time I see it, it's a character that I'd not seen before. I've seen Girls with Sword movies before, and martial arts movies from the region before, but I'd never seen one that was based in like tomb raiding and adventuring, and it felt, I think that was something that Don really brought to the table, and kind of gave just a new feel for this type of character, which I really appreciate.
So Raya comes out in quite an unstable time for the world. Do you think the context of the whole situation which is happening now will affect the way people see this movie? Like, will they find inspiration or hope? Because like trust and unity is like the main topic of the movie.
I think your like biggest sort of illusion when you're making a movie, or your biggest hope, is that the messages that you're trying to communicate find some resonance in the world outside. And I feel like we're very proud of all the messages that we're communicating in Raya, and obviously the time could not be more prime for these conversations, and we felt that way a year and a half ago when the three of us started working on the movie, but every single week that passed, we felt more and more proud of having this conversation, and also just all the thematic elements really became more timely with every week, every event, every new world development that happened. So and even now, we saw the movie like fully finished maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we all had the same reaction of just being like, wow, it continues to become more timely, and it continues to feel more profound. So I think our collective hope is that people who are having a hard time, who are asking a lot of these same questions, see themselves in the movie, see some of the character struggles, and they can relate to them. It creates some empathy, and it allows them to have some of these conversations that I could not be more important to have today.